Hello. First one of these. Don't quite know what to show, but I've been working in Blender now for 2 years. I'm self-taught entirely. I learned from YouTube. Good place to learn. I'm just going to take generally through some basics at work. We sometimes do these like shadowing or I guess streaming at work. Things that we just do a basic tutorial. So I'm going to go over some quite generic, some really easy stuff to begin with. So if you're absolutely new to Blender, you'll get something from this. And equally, I hope to cover some like low mid kind of level stuff. Kind of with a focus to game asset, low poly design. Hopefully this is going to be useful for somebody. There's already a wealth of content out there, so if it's not, I'm sure it's still like that. I really recommend YouTube as a great learning source. Equally forums, but if you just want to watch the actual process rather than like a speed run, a speed run of modeling, and equally if you are joining, like feel free to ask questions during the chat, or I think can you send messages on Twitch? But if this is popular, I'll be happy to answer and problem solve any Blender and 3D issues that you have, because I've been through pretty much all of them at this point. I'm still a bit rusty on animation, but anything modeling, texturing, baking, I could do rigging. So what I've got set up currently is my whole screen right now. I'm currently using like the most recent version of Blender, but the one before it. And I've got my preferences up on screen because I know Blender now has different options. It used to be that these were the buttons. So select used to be the one you select on your right click, but it now launches with left click as your main selection, and I think spacebar is play, maybe. But you can find this option if you've just opened up Blender, preferences. I'll go through that slowly. Because I use all loads of shortcuts as well, so I'm going to have to remember what all the buttons are for shortcuts. Right, I use right click to move, so whenever I'm going to say anything, you can invert this if you are, or feel free to use it. Space I find is best used for search because I hate navigating around Blender's interface to do anything. So I just use space, and that's really useful because I can just... You can't see it. Okay, it just popped up. I was like, it didn't show up. And this, you could just search, like if I say I want to delete something, bang, or everything that relates to that, or I can then add. And there's a few things you just have to start learning, things like mesh and UV. Also, I should say that when you load up your default scene, if this has caused any confusion for anybody just loading up Blender, you will start with the cube by default. And I think this is probably a very similar interface to what a lot of people will see. It's going to move this, and I get rid of I don't really use animation till quite late game. So basic overview, right? It might be a left click for you, but I'm using right click. So right click selects whatever you have, and if you want to pan around, I don't know how to bring key controls up, so you'll have to just remember. It's you hold the middle mouse. These should be default controls, and that will give you a pan. So already now you've selected something and you're spinning around it, which is quite nice. The tricky bit now is remembering that there are two modes of Blender. You've got primarily, right, for the basics, object mode, which is when you've got your things in a scene. You can see it says scene collection at the top. Don't worry about that for now. And there's edit mode. So in object mode, you can just move what you've got, and that's it. You could do a little other bits, but in edit mode, that's when you can like reform, reshape, pull out, and add bits. And that's when you're going to be doing a lot of all your basics. And for me, this is tab, and that'll take you straight to edit mode. I believe there is also a better. If you're not familiar with it, there is also this option. There's a bit of delay on my side. In the bottom, might be at the top for you. This bar, I've moved it down to the bottom because it used to be there. I'm an old Blender user. In edit mode, that will take you straight there. And if you look equally next to where this edit mode was, you see there's this blue thing selected. So in 3D modeling as well, there's kind of 3 things to focus on, and that's you've got vertices or vertex, edges, and faces. And if you've done like 5-year-old maths, you'll know this. So here I am looking at a vertex. and I can select any of these vertex. They highlight in orange. And then similarly, face edges. A quick shortcut for this, instead of going down here and switching between them, you can press 1, 2, or 3, and you see that cycling them at the bottom. 2 is edges, and you can select any edge of the square, it highlights in white. Similarly, 3 would be face selection, and just mixing these together. Now you've already got nice movement. And if I mean, no one's in the chat right now, but if you're having any issues, if someone pops in, just let me know. And if you're watching this, because it should be recorded on my profile, I might put it on YouTube. So feel free to add comments there. I think it can work like that, or direct message me at any time. So another really useful thing to know, and this will kind of get you going for quite a long way, is there's a few buttons that kind of alter this. And I'm still in the edit mode. There's one of the hotkeys is G, and I remember it as G for grab, and what you're doing is you're grabbing this, and you can grab it in vertex mode. And if you press, for me it's right click, that will undo that selection, and it puts it right back to where it was. Likewise, you can also do grab with edge, and that's G, and grab with face. And now you can kind of see, like, I've already made a different shape, and it's left click to apply this for me. It might be inverted controls to you, but you see it's kind of at an angle. You see it's not quite right. And what I'm currently using, I'll jump to this again in a second, this camera control. But if you have a number pad on your keyboard, I don't know if you don't have one, I don't know how to do it. But press numpad 1, you go from orthographic front view. An orthographic camera is when everything is flat, so there's no perspective in that view. It's good for isometric and 2D graphics. So you've got 1, 3 is side, 7 is top. And if you press 9 while on any of these, it will like invert what you're looking at. So if I press 7, I'm at the top. If I press 9, now I'm looking at the bottom of it. And this is really useful if you're doing anything symmetrical, or you really require that kind of accuracy, and you drag away out of it. Likewise, pressing 5 will switch between these two camera modes. So now I've switched from perspective to orthographic, and you can see this is very much like a 2D pixel art kind of game kind of look. Everything's very, very straight. There's nothing's going off into the distance, and now I've gone back to my perspective. And it's, if you want to undo what you've just done, like any other bit of software, Control Z or Control Z, it'll take you right back. So another huge component of modeling, and this is arguably one of the probably most used, especially for people who have just started, is extruding, and that's E. So it's E to extrude. Likewise, a lot of these kind of line up with the first letter as you're going to remember, like the keyword, because you would just think it's any old thing. But by pressing E, you can see something's changed now. And this blue line that's appeared, depending on which one you've selected, you might have a red or green line, I think. I'll just double check. No, okay. Not sure what that's about. But this is now implying that whatever I'm moving is moving along this axis, right? So we have this like gimbal. You've got 3 dimensions in this plane. If you've used Unity or Unreal or any like 3D software, you'll see this a lot. You've got long ways, depth, and up, and it's like X, Y, Z depending. You might see a little graphic on the top right or top left of your screen. I've disabled it because I kind of know all this, but it'll tell you which way you're looking. But now you can see if I move my mouse, and I am moving my mouse, I'm moving up, but only in this. If I'm moving side to side, I can't. It's locked right to this axis, and there's probably a way to move this quite freely. I'm just trying to remember what it is, but yeah, okay. I tend to. So if you want to move it quite freely, as in this, then as you're extruding it, you want to let go, and it looks like it's just reset, but this isn't a cube anymore. This is a cube with another 2D cube on top, if that makes sense. So it is extruded, but it's entirely flat. But if I move it around with G, it is actually pulling it around. but you can kind of see it if I get really close. Watch this kind of white line and this orange. As I extrude it, it's very difficult to see. But if you leave that there and you start doing other things, you'll slowly, quickly realize that you've got this issue. So Control Z to undo all of this. You can extrude edges and vertices as well. This is a bit more like if you're doing some box modeling. Well, I mean, for example, I could. There we go. I've got it's now a box. Like fairly simple. Quite sometimes there's better ways of modeling that box. You see, it's not symmetrical, and that's something we can have a look at later. And equally, you can pull out these vertices. It's going to be hard to see. I'm trying to stream in 1080, so everything's quite easy to see. So that's some basics of extruding. So we've learned G for grab, and we've learned E for extrude, right? And you can extrude on any of these, like that. Okay, and then we should still have a square. The other one is I, right? Another keyboard shortcut is I, and that's for inset. And what this does is I think you can only use it on faces. So in mode 3, face select, you press I, and you see it's done the same thing as extruding. It's kind of left that weird thing. So there is another bit of geometry on top there. There is something else. But as I move my mouse, it's pulling that in, but it's affecting the face on top and not another face. So this is still a 6-sided shape by all accounts. But now it has this other square in the topology of it. So in this mesh, and if I say delete this, for example, say delete that middle square, you can see it is a cube with a hole in it. And here we go. Here's another quick. Now I've made a ballot box. Pokemon Go to the polls. There you go. So with some quite simple things, you can often get something quite nice. And equally, so you've got G, I, and E. Some cool shortcuts to remember is when you've selected a face, you can hold Shift and click again, and that will add to your selection. And now anything I press, see, I've pressed E to extrude, and now you can see they've all extruded from there. It looks a bit nasty, but you could use I, and they will extrude. There's 2 modes to inset. One of these, if there's some faces connected, it will try and merge them all into one shape, and it will inset them all. So you can see it's kind of inset this cube, and I can delete that and have a little cube cut out. Or you press I, but here's a tricky bit that it doesn't tell you about. If you press I again, it insets each individual face. And this can be useful if you just want to make a 6-sided shape with holes in it. Another hotkey to press is A, and this is quite basic. So A is all. It just selects everything you're looking at, as long as you're in edit mode. So if I use A and then press I, it doesn't do anything because it's trying to do them all at the same time. But pressing it again, you see now I've got this this kind of shape. I can set that in now, and without clicking again, while these are highlighted orange as selected, a top button to press, and you'd seen me doing this earlier when I've been deleting faces, X to delete. Trying to remember it you're just crossing it out, or cut, but you can't paste it again, right? So X, and a little window should pop up. It's not showing up on stream, but this is a little delete pop up, and okay, here it is. And you can delete a multitude of things. Generally, whatever you've selected, try and delete that until you kind of do more advanced things. You can start dissolving and deleting other things. But if you just stick to faces in this instance, you see now I've made this odd looking shape. So those are some basics. I'm trying to remember if there is any other shortcuts which are going to be useful. Likely not. All right, so those are some basics navigating Blender. I'll go through some camera controls actually, because it's fine sort of looking at this, but I've lost my model. What do? I've zoomed out too much. And you could scroll back in, but if you've absolutely blown it, there's some other key shortcuts here. So if you press full stop, but on your numpad, on the number pad, it'll snap right to your object. So I could lose this and I could go, well, I have lost what I'm looking at. And without this little 3D cursor here, I'll explain that in a second actually. I've lost it. So there you do have a thing selection up here, and hopefully if I've selected it in the item, I can get right back to it. So this 3D cursor is a strange one. A lot of modifiers and a lot of tools tend to rely on this. Okay, here's probably where I should have started. So I've showed you the hotkeys as in terms of like how a veteran or professional of 2 years would use it. But actually this menu on the side, I'm using my hand. It's over there. It's over there. This takes you through some pretty clever ones. So I'll just quickly run down that. You see Extrude is there, but it just gives you a little widget, and you can do that yourself. E is faster. And if you don't have this menu on the side, by the way, it's T. I don't know why it's T. Think of it as Toolkit, Toolbox, and it only appears in edit mode for these things. Because in object mode, imagine it like you can only rotate or you can only transform. That seems to be rotating still. Another one of these is Bevel. Okay, yeah. So if you've got edges selected or a face, or even I'll go through how to do vertices in a second. But if I bevel this, okay, you have to click. I don't use these, by the way, but you can see I'm now adding this edge. And if while holding down and while still being able to move it, if I use my scroll wheel and scroll up, it will add additional loops, and this will start smoothing out that transition. Otherwise, it's just a very cut, chamfered edge. But if I leave it here, you see this little box that's popped up at the bottom. This is the bevel. There's lots of information. Just choose to ignore it. I'll show you all the important bits for now. Segments. This is the same as scroll wheel, but you can. I don't have to. I've let go. You know, I've got control over this still. And if I was using the new Blender, which I'm not, there will be a little like box at the bottom that you can expand, and it will show you a picture, and that will tell you what this can look like. And people use it mostly for like wood paneling and steps, and as long as you have enough segments, it will try and create that. But that's not going to be too useful for these purposes. Loop cut. So this is actually super useful. If I like the shape, but I want to work on, say, a more like rectangular thing, but have two of them, if I hold Control and press R, you see it's added this yellow ring. And depending on which kind of edge I'm hovering over, it will move. So it will stay in this dead center while you've not pressed anything so far. But if I use my scroll wheel, same as doing bevel, I can add additional sections, and these are equally spaced. But this theory of this example, I'm going to go 1, and then you see 2 arrows have popped up now, and I've not clicked again. But if I now move my mouse, I can move this, and this isn't locked to anything just yet. But you see, I can't scroll on this because it's using whatever I've set beforehand. But I can either click to set it in place, or I can right click to put it back in the center. And there we go. And now if I Control R on this side, it's now adding one perfectly in the middle of this, and like that. Equally, I could have just scrolled 3 times, and that'll have the same result. Loop cut, I think you can just press it, and it would. So it's not as nice. It's not as nice to use. Knife tool. Okay, so this you can just sort of press. Why is I've not used? Oh, you can just draw. I'm learning as well. But forget about that. Go back to select. Oh no. Right, escape usually cancels whatever you've done if right click isn't working. But say I want to just cut from here, but like have a really weird shape for some reason, right? You can press K, and this brings up knife, so K for knife. Get these written down, right? And if you're hovering over like nothing generally, and you're just doing it in the middle, it'll be just a normal green dot. But if you ping onto a vertice, it'll have a little red box, and that'll mean you're starting from this, which is really good for topology and doing low poly things. And now I'll cut a fancy little shape. It's not so perfect. And now this edge looks like this. Just fix that, pretend I did that right the first time. And this could be used for, this is just a really bad example, and this will also give you really bad topology, so there'll be a lot of cleanup. But you could have like a little cutout like this. There's better ways of doing this, and I don't know what the use case of this would be, but you can at least cut some things. And there's some handy tricks as well. If I'm using K to cut, I can go straight down. Say I want a loop cut, but like really like off center. If I press C, it will bind it to a very specific angle, and those are in 45-degree increments. I'm not sure how to get it in any other increment, and I think Z. So Z puts it in like X-ray mode. I don't know why it's not X, but Z will mean, so in default when I cut, apply, you can see it's cut just the visible, just what I've seen as visible. But now if I cut the same way but press Z, you see a few extra green dots may appear depending on the angle, but Z puts it as a complete slice through, and you see that's gone all the way around now. And it's enter or click, and escape. No, don't press escape. So Z, enter, yeah, enter. And as long as it goes orange, that's now been set in. So I could select, for example, all of these, and now I have a very interesting shape. This brings me on to actually another hotkey to remember, which is F. F for face. And the best way of doing this is you just select an edge, and assuming you've got like a 3 or 4-sided shape, so you want to model in either triangles or squares, ideally. If I press F now, this should automatically detect where to fill in the extra face. Okay, there we go. Depending on your shape and model, it might look different. But now I've created this. Equally, I can select all of these edges. You see they're all now orange, and my last one is white because that's my most recent selection. Press F again, it'll fill that in. That's just in case you're having troubles with it being automatic. You could also select just these two, and it will try and bring them down, stitch together. And equally, there's also probably something in here. It's called bridge. Because I don't use these all that much, I'm going to have trouble finding it, but if I press space, and now I start typing the word bridge edge loops. So you need to select edges with this, and it'll basically do the same thing. Fine. But this works brilliantly if you've got way more than just the one face. So I could select an entire ring of shapes that have nothing, so it's just 2 lines, and it would fill all of them in for me. That's good for if you're doing like a human face and you've got these like loops around the eyes and around the mouth. It could just very quickly get it all in. So there we go. There's also another way to create that shape I've just made. So I'm pressing Ctrl Z to undo everything. I could select this edge and press G, and I can just move it into place. And that's fine. But I've got this big issue. It's not like on the same surface. So pressing G, and this is where it can get a little bit complicated. Pressing G, now my cursor's changed. I'm now able to move. By pressing any of the buttons that relate to an axis, so X, Y, or Z, it will lock your selection to that axis, just like Extrusion does when that blue line appeared when I was pulling the box up. So if I press Z, now I can only move along this angle, which could be interesting if you're making that. Or I could press Y, and now I can only move in this direction, or X. If you overlap, you will get, you see it's giving you this visual error, and this will be horrible, essentially. So I'm going to bring in this mode, right? You can see it in the 2 little circles, and I've just gone into face orientation. This isn't a huge part of it. This is just good for when you've just finished a model. Anything blue is, leave it, it's blue. But anything red means it's inverted. So these faces are entirely one-sided. So if you've got, say, a perfect cube, but it's got one face missing, if you're looking at it from the outside, then, in fact, I'll show you. If you're looking at it from the outside, and this is in a game or something, then this looks like a perfect cube. As soon as I look at the red, this red won't render. It won't appear unless your engine is specifically set up that way and you have those features. I think Unity can. But now this, in terms of to the player or to the user, would be invisible. It's not going to be rendered at all because it can't see the outside. It don't see the inside. This can be changed if I press space. Brings up my hotbar. There's some like menu buttons down the bottom. It's in one of them, but I just space everything and just type invert. It's not invert, right? Type flip. See, Blender's not too intuitive all the time. And so the reason that there's this red and blue is because those are the normals. Don't ask why, I don't know. But the normal direction, so the blue or red side, will be what's visible. So blue is good, red is bad, generally. And if you've done a big model of all these things and you've got like a character, but they've got big red eyes, but the rest of them is blue, then as soon as they're in the game, they'll have no eyes. You just see right through it. And likewise, if you've done some clothing and you've got like a shirt collar, but you can see this little red bit around the neck, you'll just see right through. There won't be a shirt when you look at the character. Like if this is, imagine my hoodie, right? It's all black, so you can't see, but the front of it, blue, back of it, red, because it's all flat. As soon as this is rendered in game, I go from this to like that. You just don't see it. So flip normals will flip them. And now the outside is invisible. So if you're making an illusion game, this might be really cool. But now this is visible. And you see it's like a little optical illusion. Little quirky thing. And you can just undo that by flipping it again. So let's put this all back and then get back to actual normal stuff. It's face orientation for that. There's a few others in here. Spin can be useful, and this is where the 3D cursor, which I forgot to speak about. So generally the 3D cursor is kind of a good control point for various things. The 3D cursor acts as another origin of your object almost. And you can see in the bottom right now where I'm hovering my mouse, there's this, and this tells you your pivot point. Essentially, you can use your 3D cursor as a pivot. So now if I select this, by pressing R, R for rotate, R, it rotates around that. It will rotate around that anyway, but if I move it out the way and press R again, it's now rotating still around this axis, despite that not being the true center of it. But I'm just going to put that back. Because now if I move it again, but I've switched away from this origin, I've gone to something else. Now the object spins freely on its own, regardless of where that center is. And then spin tool is another one which makes use of this. So if you select the face with 3 in edit mode and I press spin, this doesn't always work for me, so you'll have to bear with. It will spin in the wrong direction. Right, so this little pop-up tells it which axis it's spinning on. You can just change that if I press 1 and turn this to 0. Think by word, -1. Right, you can just invert like -1, +1. And you see now it's taken this arc, but it's spinning around this circle. So this is good for pipes, ventilation. I could just delete this entire loop and I've got little... I span again accidentally. But you can make all sorts with that. And I'll bring it back to its middle. This orange dot, similarly, is the origin point of an object. And when you bring something in from 3D software into a game engine, it would generally be in the origin point of the model. So if you have furniture, for example, like a chair, you might want to put the origin point on the bottom of the model. So that when you place it in your game, it'll sit perfectly on the floor because you can snap them together. But if you mess it up, oh no, I've gone off center and I can't, how do I put it back? There's a really clever way. Now all my shortcuts are slightly different, so you will have to bear with. So what you could do is origin, right? If you just press space and you don't know what you're doing, just press space and type what you want. So origin, I don't know any of the actual controls. I should say, I think one viewer's joined in. Hello. I do have 2 years experience with this and I don't claim to be professional, but I will be helpful. I've been making models for 2 years full time. I made about 200 of them, so been through a lot of issues myself. So set origin, and this will tell you, there's a lot of information straight away. Geometry is your object. origin is the orange dot. 3D cursor is this red ring. And generally, if you just want to put the orange dot back into your object, origin to geometry. So it's from, then to. Can't do that in edit mode, so you have to do it in object mode, and it's tabbed to switch modes. Equally, there's the button on the bottom left that you can see very far bottom left. And now that has moved. And if I go, oh no, it's not now in my world origin, it's not at 000 on the XYZ, it's just somewhere kind of roundabout. For me, it's Control S. And then it might be right click or another button for you. Check your preferences on this. This is like some object thing. See, I'm using like legacy controls for Blender. They've changed all these and made them more user friendly. So there's probably equally a better way of doing this. But what you want to do is in one of these, there's object to or origin to center, and it's one of these. Selection to cursor. Yeah. So cursor in this case is 3D cursor, not your actual mouse. Very confusing. Thanks, Blender. But there we go. Now we can fix issues quite easily. Smooth. Yeah, I don't use it. I don't know. Don't really worry about it. I don't tend to use these things on the side. So, all right. Now we can go to the. Now you've learned like 5 different hotkeys. You've learned G, E, I, K, and X, and F. There's more, more than I've remembered. There's just a few other things to remember. So I'm trying to think of another useful key. We'll come back to it. So basic modeling now, if I'm going through some of the modifiers on the side. Here, in this left, I'll give you a very quick rundown of what each one of these is. You don't have to use all of them straight away, especially if you're a beginner. The most important one that we're going to focus on is the blue spanner. So it's this menu over here. So this first one, generic options, forget about it. This is your render information. So if you're rendering out images or an animation or a movie or anything, you're doing like a nice little preview. This is where you'll find all that. This is where your lighting and controls for that. This again, the third one down is kind of how big that render is and where it saves to, how it exports. This, I don't use it. In my work, we don't really render anything, but I think this is for more fine-tuning of your renders if you're producing animated work. This is some scene control stuff. So this is, I think you can use a bit of physics in this, and also you can pin your cameras. So you can have a camera and like have it pinned to your object. And if you move your object, the camera goes with it. And this is where you can set some of that up, I believe, or just set your main information there. This is world information. So when you're rendering, you usually bring in this big image, big like round, like imagine like VR, right? It's a HDRI map is what it's called. It's a big long texture, and it'd be like a sky or a room, and this will tell the engine what the light looks like when it's hitting your thing. So if you colored it in metal, say you've made a mirrored cube, you'll have like reflection of trees and stuff on it, but it'll only be in Blender, and that's useful for doing a nice render. You can have like little window light shining on your car, or get a studio light set up and do some product shots. This is all kind of like specific to your object information. Again, I don't use too much of it. This is modifiers. This is the key one. I'm going to come back to this. This is particles, which are very confusing, especially for beginners. So we'll skip that one. Then there's physics. So this way you can create all kinds of simulations. Go back to that at a later time. Constraints. So this is useful for doing cameras or specific animations. So I could essentially produce like a camera tracking on a track, following something, and then the object is. So, yeah, say I've got an object in the middle, and I want a camera to go sideways, but still be looking at it, so that it kind of does this as it goes around. You can tell your camera to move one direction, but tell your camera to lock onto your cube, and then the camera will turn as it's moving, like a nice dolly. And there's all these special things you can do there. This is more information. This is really useful for like late on stuff once you start like unwrapping things and texturing. So unwrapping is when I'll very quickly explain unwrapping because it's quite confusing. So to texture this 3D object, it's a big cube. How do I color it in, right? And in a way, if you've ever made a cereal box or you've done like packaging or product design, you need to make a net. You know, if if you have a McDonald's Happy Meals box, right? They come flat and you fold it and it clips together. So what I need to do is turn this into a cube, but flat. And there's a few ways of doing that. You can kind of cut like this. I'll go through this a bit later. Might do another stream on this. But now this could roll out and have two squares either side. Not perfect. You're meant to get like a nice cross shape with this. If you've ever made a dice out of paper, exact same thing. And now you can draw on a flat square and that will colour in. But this becomes a net, and wherever your grid is on that little square, you can colour inside that grid. Going to be quite confusing to start with, so don't worry about that yet. Since we're just going over modelling, I might do another session later on if enough people like it. I'm just going to base it on views since this is whatever. And the final one is materials. So this is texturing within Blender, and these won't export as your texture materials unless you save them and bake them in, or you've specifically drawn inside an image texture. I'll also cover that at a later time. But for now, going to get back to some modifiers. So there's a big scary list of modifiers. Whoa! Right, for beginners and for everyone just starting out, focus on purely this second column here. And again, only half of them you'll really want to be playing with anyway. I'll very quickly show you what each of them does, and then I'll go to the kind of the meat and the meat and veg. What do you call it? Like, I'll show you the most important thing of what I want to show you now, which is mirror, and then I'll show you all the rest. So mirror is great. Essentially it just cuts your thing in half alongside its origin point, and it will repeat what you do on one side onto the other based on the axis you select on this X, Y, or Z. At the minute it looks the same. There's not two cubes, and if I drag it, there's even not two cubes. That's because the origin point is moving with it when I'm pressing G, so it's mirrored, but it's moving that with it. So in edit mode, if I use G again, so G to move freely, and then Y, it hasn't created a mirror. Right, something should have appeared there. Let me just bring that on again. Why did that not happen? Okay, it won't work on the X-axis for some reason. Right, well, it will do. So it will do usually. I don't know what I've done with this file. But as the origin point is in the middle, it is mirroring around that point, right? So if in edit mode, I move this around, and now moving in symmetrical order to each other. And this is a very cool tip for anyone who wants to make characters or symmetrical objects. If you're making a bin, cardboard box, whatever asset, right? There's a button here called clipping. And in this instance, because I want to push these two together and have it like one object but in half, so I can work on one side and it happens on the other. If I delete this face, which is important actually, because as soon as I bring them together, that face will still be there, and that will cause you a lot of issues down the road. But with it gone and clipping enabled, if I G and then Y to grab and pull on the Y axis, this green line, you can see they just mesh into each other. And until I let go, until I apply this, now I've applied it, I've clicked. Now they are one object. And you can see it's not quite a perfect cube, but so this button right at the top, the one with the screen on it, the one with the camera is for your renders, don't worry about that. This one is viewport visibility. So now it's invisible for me, but it's still there, and I can bring it back. But from the object point, it looks like this. And now if I want to make a really bad robot, select the face, press I to inset. I can drag this around as well, G and Z, and pull an arm out. Oh, look, another arm. You can click and drag. Now I've got two legs. And if you're making a really, really bad game, for whatever reason, this might be a perfectly suitable model for you. And with K, with knife tool, I can cut a shape, and you might be like, that's a bit of a weird shape, but bam, bam, it's a neck. It's still mirroring on the X, right? If you get double like this, it means it's mirrored it twice. I can equally press Z and it'll mirror this way. You can mirror it on all three to create some really crazy effects. If you really want to move on to abstract work or something down the road. Generally though, don't make things like this. Don't make characters like this. Like put a bit more effort into it. But using a mirror is fine for characters, just not in the way that I've done it. So that's the mirror modifier. And if you press apply, now that is set in stone, and now it is a perfectly mirrored object. I'm going to press Ctrl-Z to undo that, and I'll just prove to you that it did apply. Press apply, and now it's on both sides. And I could have made like Minecraft conduit or whatever else. But now I have this extra seam, and say I don't want that, right? So I wanted it to be mirrored in the when I'm modeling it, but when I make it, this is adding. So when you want low poly game assets, each of these faces or triangles, triangulate faces, these are going to add to your kind of load on your engine and such. So this is 4 faces all around, and again here as well, but they're not needed, right? I don't need 8 faces here because it's the same thing. So if I select this, and if I select an edge, I could, middle mouse to scroll all around the object. Way too slow, especially if you have a big one, a big long load of edges, right? If you hold Shift and hold Alt at the same time and then right click, it will select the entire loop for you, and it will find that. And then again, X to delete, cross out, and you can delete edges. This is when you'll have issues like this, right? Because it's deleting the edge, but those edges are connected to faces and are required for that, for whatever reason. This is where dissolve comes in. So you can treat dissolve as, pretend dissolve is when you want to delete something but not change what it looks like. Dissolve edge, and this sort of erases it but keeps that original bit there. That's nice. Okay, let's get back the cube. So some other really cool modifiers to play with. There's a few here. I'll go through the ones of which I recommend to use if you're looking to do low poly modeling. So there's array, bevel, boolean, a little bit advanced, decimate, really good if you're doing like quite organic things. If you want like a really low poly landscape, you can just decimate it, and it essentially reduces geometry down and it redoes it all. So I can do a really quick example here. I will go through all that at a later point. I know this looks really, really quick. Oh no, I've got a spam message. How do I delete that? 1 second, I'm just going to quickly delete this this chat thing. Can I ban user? Block. There we go. Sorry, I just don't want this like showing up. There we go. Chat is clear. Right. So if my one viewer was that spam bot, thanks. At least you gave me a view. So right, I'm just gonna. I won't tell you how to do this because this for a beginner. This is horrible. Horrible stuff to try and figure out straight away. So I've got this really like nasty shape, right? And I can just whatever, right? I'm just gonna very quickly try and make something that looks a bit organic. Horrible. But decimate, you can unsubdivide for 1. And as you go along, it starts to remove those lines. Collapses also. You can sort of drag the slider, and it will start sort of redoing the topology in a way. And if I apply this, it looks all right. Could be a rock. You can just neaten it up a bit. Get rid of some of these that aren't required, or leave them, and you've got whatever this is. And then some other full stop on the numpad to go back to snap to your object. Mirror, great. Solidify also can be useful. Subdivision, if you're not doing low poly, subdivision will save your life. Essentially, the way subdivision works, think of it as it just smooths it rounds it out, right? But it takes two lines. I'm going to draw this on a bit of paper and put it on the webcam, so you have to just stick with me a second. So these are 3 vertices, right? Say this is the edge of my cube, and these are the 2 edges that connect it. What subdivision does is per level of subdivision, currently I'm set to 1 in my viewport, it will add additional ones here, and it will automatically join them and then sort of hide the excess. And with enough layers, this eventually becomes a rounded thing, much like beveling was when you scroll on the bevel. So hiding this this is essentially the same process, right? And if I scroll, this is 2 subdivisions, 3, 4, bringing it back, keep pressing, and eventually you get a very smooth shape. And if you've done like a really low poly human, you can just bam, 1 subdivision, nice and organic looking. Can add extra topology where you don't need it, however, so it can be very dangerous for low poly modeling. So right, one of the modifiers to go through is array, and from your origin point, again, it'll calculate the width of your object to put another one next to it, unless you change these numbers on the side. So currently it's at an offset, and it's going along this axis, which it doesn't tell you what it is, but because it's got a 1 in it, it's moving 1 full width away from your origin. If I put another 1 here, it's now moves 1 and across, think like chess. So one of these is X, one of these is Y, and this one's probably Z. It can be useful. And if I increase the amount that this arrays, it'll start stepping. If you drag up from 1 and select all, you can change all at the same time. Can be quite useful. But say I want 1, yeah, I've created 5. But I want like a row of blocks, right? I want to be able to actually see the gaps in between. So I can just hold drag on this and increase it, or I could type in a specific number. Or equally, if you want more fine tuning and you don't know the exact number, if you hold Shift while drag clicking on it, you get a very slow movement. You get like a lot more control. And there's a lot of ways you can use this. So you can use this in combination with like an arc or an empty. I'll go through empties actually in a second, and you can have the empty sort of pull it so it kind of bends around, and you get this like really cool shape to it. So I'll show you an empty now. So Control A. I should have gone through this at the beginning actually. Shift A while you're in object mode, so you've not got anything selected, will bring up your like kit of stuff. Meshes are like this square, and there's some other default shapes here, so you can bring like a sphere, a donut shape, a little cone, and if you get some add-ons, you can get like a little bolt, and some like maths related things. A bit complicated, but empty is something to show you. So just bring in a plane axis at the minute. You can't see it, but that's because it's inside this cube, because it's the origin point and your 3D cursor. Your 3D cursor is where things spawn to. It's where things are generated as well. If I press G to drag, it moves around. But what I can do is, you see the empties up in the top here as well. If I put object offset on, and then select this empty I've created, I should be able to just delete, change that. If I select my empty, it is selected, and now when I move it around, everything is moving in sequence to where this empty is. So if I press G and sort of move the empty, there we go. Equally, you press R, so R for rotate, and now it rotates. And you can make a low poly scorpion tail or dragon or whatever with this, or you might be able to animate on this actually. Say you want something to wag side to side, you just put a keyframe on the first part of the rotation of the empty, and then on the end, and then it'll do this as you go. You can do something like that or something like that. Up to you. And if you could stack these on top of each other, and they go in order of the way you stack them, right? So that is important depending on what you're doing. So now I've added a subdivision. Now they're round. Going to go back to here. But another one is bevel, and this will, in the exact same way that doing this. So when I was beveling edges earlier with Control B, or using the toolbox on the side, this will apply it a bit like fake apply it, so you can very quickly remove it. So it's very useful. So it means you can work on this without having to sort of select a load of extra things. So if I do bevel this myself manually, and I want to make this bigger, nightmare, I have to select this as well and sort of do this. But now if I want to, oh no, it's all like messy. So to avoid that, you can leave it as this, and if I in fact do drag this around, perfectly beveled again. And you can increase this as well, and you get some very nice rounded shapes. This is really impressive, and Remember that nothing in real life as well has a perfectly sharp edge. Maybe a knife. If you're making a knife or a sword, that might be useful to do. But if you're doing like a kitchen countertop or a cup or a side of a jar or whatever, and you can use this width. I'm using Control and click to get like precise dragging on that, and you can see it's made a very nice, realistic rounded edge. Some other hot tips to sort of visualize your scene if you're modeling something specific. So bottom right for me, it might be at the top view. I have different viewpoints. So, this is useful actually. So the first one is wireframe. This is the lowest demanding on your system. So if you've got a lot, then that's fine. This is kind of your baseline. This is also very not demanding. There's a little arrow on the right here. This is where you can select the different kinds of like lighting and surfaces, just for visualizing it, not for the final thing. The third one is your image stuff, and this is where your HDR comes into effect. So this, you can see, is a world, much in the same way as this is, but that's for your final render, and this is just for you to visualize it. So I can change the lighting setups in here, and you can see it's sort of fake lighting that. But it looks a bit blocky, right? There's a quick way to fix this. For me, it's W. There's probably also something in one of these. Oh boy. I can't quite see it. Oh yeah, here we go. So in object, there's shade flat and shade smooth. If you shade smooth, it converts all your squares, your squares and triangles, or everything basically, and guesses what it should look like if it's smooth. And this is a great way to do low poly things if you want something rounded. So you see this looks like incredibly smooth and round, but even if I reduce these segments, you can see it has got these quite a lot of segments, and that's not good for a low poly game. But I can bring it right down to 1. Right, you can see on this wireframe now, right down to 1, and this looks a bit fine. But from here, if you're looking exactly in the middle, right, not at the edges, it does look perfectly. It looks still that high detail, and this is what a lot of games do to sort of trick you into thinking something is rounder. A lot of characters, if you look at any asset in the game, you see the character head is just like actually quite spiky, and it's like even arms are quite spiky. But because you're looking at the texture and the detail and the creases of fabric and everything else around it, then it really tricks your eye. And just adding a little bit extra, that could be fine. If this is a small asset in a game, like that's the topology. That's pretty good. If you're doing super low poly, you might want to change that. But matte cap can be useful. So this is what you do if you want something less demanding, but you just wait if you work on something. So it gives you some presets. The one I use a lot, and because it's quite similar to the ZBrush method, is this. And this is the normal color, normal direction. It will change depending what you do. But if I've been sculpting on this, and say I've got, now I can very quickly see that this has a big hole in it, whereas before I may not have. It does come in useful, trust me on that one. And I can change this to a shiny metallic. And you can see it's reflecting a bit of a floor and a room around it, and that's kind of a fake HDR again. But now it does look like it's quite impressive. And now I show you a little hot tip to end on, because I've nearly got to go soon. So materials, this is good to quickly visualize again. This is super difficult to do. It was for me at the beginning, because I really struggled to know the difference between materials and textures. So we're pressing new. It creates a new material. There's a whole load of junk. Ignore it. But this setup is something called the principled Bsdf. Maybe another anagram of that. And this is just a really cool, smart way of texturing something or adding a material. Quite self-descriptive. You can change the color of it, and you can see it is changing depending on which one I pick. I'll leave it at slightly white. Metallic. So this goes from 0 to 1. Generally, I try and stick between 0 and 1. I don't tend to go like somewhere in between, because either it's metal or it's not, but you can vary that depending. So now it's full metal, but it's not too shiny. But the way to make it shiny, if you wanted to, so I can make a mirror, or I can make something look like it's really worn and rusted, and that's what this roughness does. Specular. I'll quickly touch on specular. This is generic how much like light hits the surface. Plastics and more like certain things like that, I think will benefit from it. But if I turn, you can't see it changing. You do already visualize it a bit more clearly. But roughness will, if you see if I move it down, now it's quite mirror-like, and if I move it up, entirely flat. But it still has metallic properties, so it's slightly darker than a standard material. If I turn the metal down, you see it's got a bit brighter. But put the metal back up, it is dark again. So WAP 0, full roughness, fully clear, full mirror. There we go, and it's using the world scene in the render in the viewport mode to generate this reflection. And at the minute it's real time because it's not too demanding on my system to do this, and it's quite an easy shape. And it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to do. Yeah, those are some nice little tips for you. Right, so we've gone through a good bunch of them, at least a good bunch of these. Solidify can be good. Right, I'll show you solidify, and then I'll bounce. So hot tip. This is kind of maybe a bit advanced. Select the whole thing, press X, and then delete dissolve faces. Don't do that. Right, that should work, but dissolve faces. Only faces. Yeah, okay. So press X and then only faces. And now you're left with this kind of just wireframe. But if you add a solidify, you need face topology to solidify. But you can use skin. This is kind of what I just misremembered it. And skin will follow those edges and add geometry to it. And you can play with this too, to generate all kinds of nonsense. A bit fiddly. But say now I've got this shape. Actually, undo a lot of all that. Control Z to it, undo. I'm going to get a little back. Right, A to select all, then press I. And I again, sometimes to do each face. Press X to delete faces. And now I've got this. I'm going to shade it flat. I press W in that instance. It might be a different shortcut for you. But I'm going to go back to face orientation. It's invisible on the inside. But solidify will take whatever you've got and add. It'll extrude it all like but on the inverse, or you can change it. But it basically adds another face to the side. So now this isn't invisible on the inside, but this is adding topology. If I increase this level of thickness, you can see there is actually some geometry going on there, and now you've got a really nice little shape. So there we go. Just before I leave, very quickly, I'm going to give you a little challenge, and I'll do it here as well, just so you can see it is possible. I want you to make a little guitar, but make it really low poly, and then also using that low poly model, make it high poly. I'm not going to tell you all the shortcuts I'm using because it's homework. So, right, this is probably the worst way of doing it, but you can see that's kind of a guitar, right? And I'll show you some cool modifiers. So one is solidify. We just went through that a second ago. Now there's the body of the guitar, and I can bevel. And now I've beveled, I've just added that nice little trim. I can decrease that. Some of these, there's some things at the bottom here. You might want to play with these, but they affect how it bevels. And then there is also subdivision. Now you can see because of the order I've got these in, it's not quite a guitar yet, but if I press the up arrow, let's move that subdivision up a layer, and if I press it again, up another layer. So I'll just disable these. So this was my base mesh, add a subdivision, increase that a couple times, maybe make this a bit sharper. It doesn't quite look like a guitar. All right, but pretend it is. And now the solidify is actually sort of bringing this down a bit. There we go, that looks a bit more natural now. It's useful to have some references from time to time. Yeah, that's almost there. And then a bevel right at the end. But it is beveling the edges here. So I'm going to go and change it to angle or is it not smooth shaded? There we go. Might tighten that bevel because it does look a bit off. And then this is just in case you're getting this weird. It looks like it's stretching, or it is rounding like really weirdly around the edges, despite it being flat. Like it looks like this is kind of domed on top. This is a pro move. On the very left column, there's a weighted normal, and you just want to make sure you've got. So in the green triangle here, there's another one in normals, auto smooth. So you apply this along with smooth, and it will calculate more effectively what the shading should look like. And as long as using that with weighted normals can help a lot. So if I just tick auto smooth now, you'll see this nice and clean up. And then going into here. So this is without weighted normals. You can see it's got like you can still see the bevel a little bit. But if I just apply it, it's helped smooth it out. And I think this just might be a shading issue on that, or it's probably just from my topologies being a bit off. There we go. Selecting an edge and holding Shift and E will give you a crease tool. It is also in the top here, so press N. And this brings up another panel, and it's in one of these crease. And sliding that between 0 and 1 will tell it either not to subdivide or to subdivide. And from there, you've got like a bit of a guitar body, right? Bring in another shape. You don't have to work all in one shape. You can really kind of do it however you like. And one of the hotkeys I missed, maybe the most important one, is S. S to scale. You can change the size of things. That's also quite handy. So this might look fast, but this is just how it goes. This is just how I work. Sort of, right? Nearly there. Just ever so nearly. Right. Well, this is going to be the end of the stream. I've done an hour. I intended to do about an hour. I might do it again if enough people watch it or enough people message or whatever. I can go through some more advanced things later. I realized I didn't really do anything specific from low poly game assets, but this is the methods of which you would use to start creating that yourself. So hopefully that's useful. I'm going to stream a game later on tonight. If you're watching live, I'm going to do Kingdom Come Deliverance. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. Feel free to get in contact. I'll be on YouTube as well. Bye.